Nate Vance and to Tobias Elwood for this powerful and eye-opening conversation on the hard lessons that Nate learned serving in the front lines of Ukraine's ongoing fight for survival and self-determination. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the Warsaw Security Forum is pleased to partner with the European Value Center for Security Policy to bring you the last panel discussion of the second and final day of the 2025 defense track. Over the next hour, our panel will reflect on the current security challenges in East Asia and what European countries in particular can learn from the experience of Indo-Pacific partners such as Japan, South Korea, as well as Taiwan, on how to think about infrastructure, force projection, and deterrence vis-a-vis large and powerful neighbors, be they China or, of course, in our case, the Russian Federation, to maintain regional stability and to secure their territory from both ongoing and future threats. To moderate this next panel discussion, it is my pleasure to welcome to the stage Jakub Janda, Executive Director of the European Value Center for Security Policy. Jakub, please do join me on stage.
All right, good afternoon. Let us jump right into it. So I'm Jakub Janda, European Value Center for Security Policy. Just one sentence about us. We are the only European think tank with permanent presence in Taiwan. So if you visit Taiwan, you need to visit the general here, but you also need to visit us as gatekeepers of Europeans in Taipei. But what we're going to talk about today is the Asian insights for Europe. So what can we actually learn from activities in Asia, and how are these theaters interlinked? So let me introduce our speakers very quickly. First, on my left, retired Rear Admiral Mark Montgomery. He is with the FDD, Foundation for Defense of Democracies, does a lot of wargaming on helping Taiwan to get ready. And he knows also the European theater quite well, so we'll be talking about it. To his left, Lieutenant General Yi Xing-Shir, Deputy Chief of General Staff for Intelligence in Taiwan, in the Taiwanese military. So we have one of the most senior officers to tell us about what Taiwan can see on the military side. On his left, retired General Philip Breedlove, former NATO Supreme Commander in Europe. So he will tell us about what he sees as what we as Europeans should be doing to be ready, because readiness is costly, as we all know. And Michael Coulter, he is with the Hanwha Global Defense, mainly working in South Korea, but he has the good outlook as a naval intelligence officer to really see where are we. So let me start first with Mark. And Mark, if you could put it up to 3 minutes, what do you think are the key lessons?
All right, thanks. Well, look, what I've been looking at, and I think what Jacob, you have as well, and what I think the Taiwan government's been looking at is that we're often like enticed by the most dangerous scenario, and we think about how do we stop a cross-strait invasion. The reality is China's most likely scenario is the one we need to learn from, and I think Europe can learn from a lot from it too, and you're experiencing it yourselves. And that's the idea of a cyber-enabled economic warfare campaign conducted by China against Taiwan. And what this does is it's an effort to put increased pressure on the society of Taiwan by attacking across all the sectors and using diplomatic, economic, and administrative tools, and China is very good at administrative tools, to pressure particularly the communications, energy, and financial services sectors. And all of them are vulnerable. And what you do is they increase the pressure slightly to pressurize Taiwan, but not get the United States or Japan or Australia to take action. And China is very good at controlling that rheostat. And from our biggest concern is probably in the energy sector. Just as background, they have their energy sector is about 50% LNG, liquid natural gas, 50% coal and renewables. And they have, Taiwan has a couple weeks of stowage of LNG. So if China can block 10 or 15 ships through political pressure on Qatar or missile closure areas around the ports or, stopping them for Coast Guard inspections, they'll very rapidly bring the LNG down to zero in Taiwan. And when you do that, Taiwan's going to have a tough choice. They lose 50% of their grid. Do they protect their society, hospitals, schools, homes, or do they protect industrial capacity, TSMC, UMC, and thousands of secondary suppliers? Most leaders, democratic leaders, will pick protecting society. And that now, a week or 2 week long problem in Taiwan is a year-long problem in Europe. Because if we lose access to TSMC, UMC, and their supply chain, that's not just the high-end chips in your phone. That's the legacy chips that proliferate everything else. There'll be a worldwide economic, recession at a minimum if we get at this. So that cyber-enabled economic warfare campaign, if executed by China to grab Taiwan without any damage, can leave the global economy with significant damage. And so that's what we're taking a look at. And I think we see the same issues, that kind of gray zone, cyber-enabled economic warfare conducted by Russia, but not near to the degree that China is an expert at.
Thank you, Mark. This is exactly a good start to hear from the Taiwanese military intelligence chief. So, sir, what are you seeing?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me and our delegation here. It's truly an honor to thank you, particularly for Warsaw Security Firm, give us this opportunity to say ourselves, our story. Here's what I would suggest. Imagine a world that where two most powerful nations, China and Russia, united not by shared value, but by shared opposition and moving to lockstep to challenge today's global orders. And the thing I just said is not near possibility. It's what we're seeing right now. Why we have the concern of this? I will suggest there are 4 areas. Number one is their strategic alignment against stability. And we all know China and Russia openly reject the current international system, seeking their own version. And also their coordinated position in the UN Security Council block resolution aimed at ending conflicts or enforcing sanctions, leaving aggressors unchecked. And second concern is their military coordination across the flashpoints. China and Russia joint military drill in the Sea of Japan, South China Sea, and also at Arctic. These are not routine exercise. There's a deliberate signal of readiness of challenge the Western military presence. I mean, particularly Russia ongoing war in Ukraine, and China increasing pressure to us, Taiwan, and also South China Sea, create simultaneous crisis could overwhelm global security alliance. And third one will be the economy, as earlier Mark, you just mentioned. China trade to Russia has surged, providing critical technology and industrial goods, and particularly energy purchase could create a huge impact for Western sanctions. And this economy support allowed Russia to sustain its military campaign longer and prolonging instability in Europe. And the last one is all this risk of coordinated escalation. Think about this. If China move on Taiwan while Russia increasingly their offensive in Ukraine, the world could face two fronts of geopolitical crisis, unprecedented in modern history. The scenario I just said is strained the diplomatic channel, risk of military miscalculation, and put our role to a closer, a wider conflict. So what should we do? I think our message is clear. We cannot afford complacency. The China and Russia partnership is not a benighting allies. It's a convergent axis of military, economy, political power that undermine the foundation of global peace. In Europe today, you are fighting your own security, but with the help that you help us, I think we can prevent the possibility war in Indo-Pacific. So help us and help you. Thank you.
Thank you, General. Thank you. I think we'll have a lot of discussion about it. General Brylov, what are you seeing?
So first of all, thanks for having me here. I'm going to approach this a little differently. I have about 4 or 5 really quick things to generate conversation and maybe to stimulate the questions later. The first thing that I would talk about is that it's not perfect in Asia either, but in Asia there is a better understanding of who the enemy is and the actions the enemy is taking, and that we are at war. Now, it may be more of a political and cognitive war right now, but there are certainly some kinetic actions also happening in the Pacific. But Pacific nations, by and large, understand that they have an enemy and they're at war. In NATO, this is not the case. We still have mixed feelings about what's happening in Ukraine and with Russia. And folks are slow and not always agreeing to label that a European war. And so the focus that the Asian nations bring to dealing with China, NATO could use a lot of the same kind of focus on understanding that Mr. Putin has never been a partner in peace. Mr. Putin is not now a partner in peace, and Mr. Putin will never be a partner in peace, and then taking actions accordingly. The second thing I would like to bring up is, and I'll talk primarily about America because I don't want to be critical of any of the nations represented in the audience, but in Asia they know how to do shipbuilding. They know how to build ships. They know how to get them on time and stay very close to the cost. I will tell you that in our country, we have completely lost the art of building ships on time and at cost. And we are fast losing that as a art and science in America. And we have to get on top of it because our country and the Western world need American ships as a part of the fleets that are sailing. The technologies, the capabilities, these are incredibly important to the West, and we have to get back on top of that. To the same remark is that in Asia, we have a much better, more capable set of nations when it comes to manufacturing and military industrial capabilities. And actually, we have countries that can surge during peacetime. We are fast finding in America and in many other Western countries that we do not have the capability to surge even to meet what's going on in Ukraine right now. So we have to address this in our military-industrial complex, and we have to, in America, change laws to allow companies to actually build excess capacity. We have to figure out how to incentivize our companies to have excess capacity so that we can meet a wartime surge in capability. The last category is readiness. The United States Air Force just had its biggest exercise since Korea in Asia. And it was a huge exercise looking at everything from intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance to transportation, down to fighter and strike ops. And what we have learned, and I'll just leave you with the two top observations that come out of that exercise. We need to push more supplies forward. I'm going to relate that to NATO in just a minute. We need to push supplies forward. And secondarily, something that we're actually good in the West, but we need to do more of it, is we need to push authorities down to make decisions and to make engagement decisions and to allow our really capable troops to do their job without having to phone home to someone to figure it out. So push out supplies, push down authorities. Push out supplies. Does anybody remember with me back in 2014 when the first invasion of Ukraine started? And we went to the Wales summit shortly after both Crimea and the Donbass were invaded. And one of the things we decided to do was put these enhanced units forward in the Baltic nations, in Poland, and other places. We actually put the units forward, but remember what we said we were going to do is push enhanced units forward, meaning taking their enablers like air defenses and artillery, and then taking the rounds of ammunition that they would need forward. We said we were going to do that. We've done a pretty good job of moving the troops forward. We have done a very poor job of moving the enhancing capabilities that we promised, and we're relearning that lesson right now in Asia. And the last thing I would say is a very personal observation. When I was a very young general officer, I commanded Luke Air Force Base. At Luke Air Force Base, we had 10 fighter squadrons, 216 F-16s on one Air Force base. 2 of those squadrons were Asian squadrons. We had a Singaporean squadron, and we had a Republic of China Taiwan squadron. I flew as an instructor pilot in that squadron with many of his friends. And what I learned from both Singapore and from Taiwan is they are investing in the readiness of their troops. Even at the time on the busiest F-16 base in our Air Force, their pilots were flying more than our pilots. They make decisions to keep the readiness of their troops up. When you have to fight tonight, readiness wins the war, not future plans. Say that one more time. When you have to fight tonight, readiness wins the war. Thank you.
Thank you, General. Michael, please.
Thank you. I appreciate Jacob having me and being able to address this forum. Going after 2 generals and an admiral, a general, and a supreme allied commander is a challenge because a lot of the good ideas have already been said. But let me focus my comments in a couple of different ways. From a geopolitical standpoint, this has been a great conference. I've been refreshed on views in Europe, but clearly challenging security environment, conflict on the doorstep, competition going around, but also the underpinnings of political uncertainty. And I think one of the takeaways for this panel is that picture is pretty similar in Asia. I mean, if you think about it, in Korea, Korean companies have been on war footing for 70 years, right? Because there is a neighbor with which we're still at war, and we need to create the capacity to protect ourselves. So in the region, there's active competition going on, which sometimes, as Phil mentioned, it even gets kinetic, right? So I think one takeaway is that site picture is similar. There's a lot of uncertainty, both from a conflict standpoint, but also from a political standpoint in Asia. One thing I would note, though, that is significantly different, and Phil mentioned this too, is that because Korea in particular, I'll speak for as a Korean CEO, Korea in particular, has been on a war footing for 70 years. It's caused the nation to act differently. When you're on a war footing, you have to invest in the capabilities that you have. So the industrial capability that is existent in Korea and some of the other Asian countries is significantly higher. From a commercial standpoint, we, as a commercial company, are also competing against very heavily subsidized Chinese shipyard and companies. And when you're competing against highly subsidized Chinese shipyards and companies, then you have to get incredibly efficient. It causes you as a company, as a nation, to invest in your technology, to invest in your efficiency. And similar to many countries in Europe, we also have a shrinking labor force, workforce. So how do you compete against heavily subsidized Chinese companies that are, you have to have the right technology, you have to be incredibly efficient. When you think about from Europe what advantages there are there, that creates that industrial capacity, allows companies from Korea to deliver very quality products at very quick times with very high certainty that it's going to get there and be reliable, right? From a commercial standpoint, from a business standpoint, I would take that note. I will take 1 second, self-serving from a Hanwha perspective, but the way Hanwha looks at the world is because there has been a lack in many parts of the world, Phil mentioned the United States and certainly some here in Europe, a lack of industrial capacity that is going to be rebuilt. Customers are looking for very quality product very quickly, but they're also looking for sovereign capability. This political discussion has meant that people are a little uncertain about what alliances are going to be there, what partners are going to be strong. So with that view of the world, Hanwha's strategy is to take all of the strength that we have in Korea and to create sovereign domestic capability in core markets. So in Australia, there are now 1,000 Australians that have taken RIP from Korea into Australia and are building, in my view, the best infantry fighting vehicle and self-propelled howitzer in the world for Australia and for export. Here in Poland, for years now, we've been working with Polish partners, with PGZ, with private companies, WB, and others, to create capacity to both produce and maintain product here in Poland. In the United States, Phil made the comment about shipbuilding in the United States. We acquired a shipyard last year. Our intent is to take the technology that we have from our shipyard in Korea and create that capacity to help meet the needs. So Hanwha's view of the world, and the reason there's an American CEO of a Korean aerospace and defense company, is we're going to evolve from being the leading aerospace and defense company in Korea, which we will still be, but we will be multi-domestic and create sovereign capability with partners. And here in Europe, the United States also, that is our view. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. So since this is maybe one of the most, let's say, senior panel of military officers maybe in Central Europe this year, I think we really need to pick up the brains of which we have here on the panel. So I would really ask if there will be any questions in the audience, just raise your hands. I will give you a floor in a second. But first I want to ask Mark and then ask our other panelists here. First with Mark, Mark, you do and we do sometimes together these war games about Taiwan. But usually the question is, does Europe actually have any role in all of that? So what do you think about it?
Obviously, I think they do. I wouldn't be here in Warsaw if I didn't think that. This is a great, Warsaw Security Forum is a great forum to talk about these issues. And it's hard. It's easy to think, Russia first. But Europe can't think Russia only. There is a lot Europe can do to help Taiwan, to help Japan, help Korea in a fight, but principally I'm thinking about Taiwan. And I'll go from easiest to hardest. The easiest one's debunking. There's countries in Europe, particularly France and the UK, but there's others that have excellent debunking teams that can go out and call, bullcrap on Chinese influence operations and cognitive warfare going on, and they can assist the United States and Taiwan in doing that. And believe me, China is running that nonstop against Taiwan. They can help. There's companies here that can help with cyber and critical infrastructure protection. The same kind of attacks that you see on U.S. and European critical infrastructure is going on in spades on Taiwan's critical infrastructure. If you have a great tool, that tool will be good in Taiwan. Now we get to the hard ones. The hard one is the hard truth. And the hard truth is one country sells Taiwan 99.9% of its foreign military sales, and that's the United States. Every other country, with very mild dual-use exceptions, every other country avoids selling to Taiwan. Europeans sell to some pretty sporty countries, right? So, in the Middle East and elsewhere. But somehow they draw the line on Taiwan and say we won't do it. And we all know why they won't do it. It's because they're afraid of provoking China. But here's this crazy thing. The United States and a bunch of other countries are willing to go to war to protect Taiwan's ability to not be coerced, lose tens of thousands of soldiers, sailors, and airmen and Marines. But we're scared of provoking China. And if you've heard this story before, it sounds like March of 2022 in Europe, where we don't provide the right weapon systems to Ukraine for fear of provoking Russia. We have that same provocation problem. I say NATO should collectively agree to sell the weapons. 32 countries is a lot harder for China to push back on. There's money to be made here for European firms. We deliver about $4 to $6 billion a year worth of gear. They easily could use between $10 and $15 billion a year worth of gear as they increase their defense spending up to 5%, which is President Lai, the president of Taiwan's goal. That's a lot of opportunity for European firms to make money and provide support to a beleaguered democracy. But you have to do it collectively, because I know outside of Lithuania and Czechia, you're not going to do it individually. And unfortunately, neither of those countries runs a defense industrial base that's going to get those billions going. So for me, the biggest thing Europe can do is stop self-deterring, stop being cowed by Chinese provocations, and instead stand up for a beleaguered democracy.
Thank you. That's a great call to action. We can really clap, absolutely. I think message approved. So we can really start with the questions, if I can ask. Could you really pick up? Yes, please here first. And if I can ask, quickly introduce yourself and a question, please, so that we use the time well.
Thank you. I'm Stephen McKelvey from Kennesaw State University in Georgia. I have a question for General Breedlove. Sir, you said that it would be good if the NATO alliance pushed authority downwards so that lower-level commanders could make authoritative decisions quickly. I wonder if this should apply to pilots who are on air policing missions, whether they should have the authority to shoot down Russian fighter jets who trespass into NATO airspace and then refuse to leave.
Thank you. Very good question here in Poland. Second and third there, if I can ask for the mic. And please, General Breedlove, if you can start answering or right away. Thank you.
Okay, so first of all, I just want to go on record at saying we are in the wrong place right now. We should not be doing air policing. We should be doing air defense. Air policing is a peacetime mission. Do all of you think that we're at peace in Europe right now? No, we're not at peace in Europe right now. We need to get out of the peacetime construct and get into a more tactical wartime construct and have defensive counter-air rules of engagement so that we can engage in hostile acts. There's a lot of people in Europe that think that an air policing airplane can react to a hostile act. It can't. It can react if it's fired upon itself. Now, a sovereign airplane flying defensive or flying peacetime cap over their country, that's a different matter. But the bottom line is we should not be sending pilots into the air now with peacetime ROE when real bullets, real drones, real missiles are flying all over Europe.
Thank you, sir. Next question, please.
Okay, Ray Wojcik from the Kościuszko chain in Warsaw. My question for the whole group is if you had a chance to visit the White House and talk to President Trump about what's happening in Europe with vis-a-vis Ukraine and then forward defense that General Breedlove was referring to, and you had a moment to explain to the President and to the White House staff why defense of Asia is coupled and directly linked to what we're doing in Europe, what would be the points of strengthening our presence or having the right presence still in Europe? What is the point of that and how we say we're going to defend against China by doing these 3 or 4 things in Europe? How would we explain that to the President?
Thank you.
I'll jump first and say, look, our posture in Europe is broadly, 55 to 60,000 forward station forces. They're the backbone of NATO. They can't go. That is how NATO can reply to a significant action by Russia. They are the enabling forces that General Breedlove was referring to earlier. They're the targeting capabilities. They're the logistics capabilities. They're the enablers that allow the divisions that we keep in continental United States to come out and fight. So those need to be, if we are a member of NATO and we're going to meet our Article 5 requiremements, those need to be protected. The other group that needs to be protected are these rotational forces in the Baltics and in Romania, Bulgaria, that are a very small number, that constitute about 15 to 17,000 troops, which is a very small percentage of our overall force posture, under 0.1%. Those forces are the ones that deter Russia in specific places, the Baltics, Poland, Romania, and elsewhere. Very small numbers achieve very large results. So what we're doing with our forces in Europe is actually allowing us to have a much larger force presence pushed into the Pacific. Forward stationed forces and permanently rotating forces actually provide readiness for your home units, and they provide your ability to project power further in the Pacific. And the other thing I would tell them is keep your munitions forward, restock, rearm, both in Asia and the Pacific. There is a natural tendency to want to keep things in the continental United States so you can, quote, swing them. What I found out in swinging is you end up reducing them. And while we swung for munitions for 20 years, we reduced our stockpiles from 75% of perfect to 25% of perfect over a 20-year period. And so I would keep my munitions forward where the forces can use them.
Who else wants to respond? General?
So I would just make a point about what is our policy and what is our strategy. And I'm often asked when I lecture at university about, well, what's our policy towards Ukraine? Because there's a lot of people in America that don't know what our policy is about Ukraine. And that's because we don't have a clear policy about Ukraine in America. And when we get into the conversation, they ask about our policy towards Taiwan and our policy towards North Korea and all of these things. And I remind them that they can go online and find these policies, but they don't mean a thing. Our policy towards Taiwan is being written every day in Ukraine. Our enemies around the world are looking at what the West is doing in Ukraine, and that's what they probably should expect from the West when it comes to their country. You probably had the same mother I did. She said, people don't care what you say. They're going to watch what you do. And so the world is watching what we're doing in Ukraine, and our policies are being written there every day.
Thank you.
I will stay out of the politics. We're spending a lot of time with President Trump's team, but it's all about shipbuilding. So I don't plan to lecture him on politics.
Okay. Next questions. I saw there and then in the front here.
Thank you so much. My name is Antonia. I work at the Georgetown University School of Foreign Service. I come from Romania. My question is regarding NATO's China policy. We have seen some, I think, critical developments with the new strategic concept agreed in 2022, where we have China mentioned for the first time. Then in 2024, the allies agreed that China is a decisive enabler of the war in Ukraine. However, with this new administration, we didn't see the same level of engagement, nor in the statement after the Hague summit, nor in the dialogue with the IP4 countries that used to be present at these summits as well. So I'm wondering, why do you think the Trump administration is not using NATO to get a united front on China with its European allies?
Thank you. Fair question. Who wants to tackle it? Maybe just one of you is enough, but as you want.
I'll give that a try. Well, first, I think there was also not near enough reference to Russia in the NATO announcement. I think this has as much to do, I mean, my personal opinion is we're very slow to acknowledge, collectively NATO, that we're at war with, that Ukraine is at war with China. Ukraine is at war with Russia, North Korea, Iran, and China. And of those, Russia's obviously the biggest belligerent. But China's actually the next biggest belligerent because they backstop the Russian war machine. The Russian war machine would not exist without 40+% increases in imports and exports with Russia, without the microelectronics that enable the cruise and ballistic missiles that are hitting Kiev and other cities every day. NATO needs to do a much clearer job of saying China is a belligerent in this war against Ukraine, a war that Europe and NATO have identified, as a threat to our security. And so, from my perspective, it's a lost opportunity. I think the China issue was just a smaller included case of not wanting to address Russia enough in the statements.
Thank you. Next question here. I see Dr. Xi of Taiwan. Thank you. And then we'll go to the second and third rounds.
Su Chen-Shu from National Security Council of Taiwan. There's a question I found pretty intriguing. That is, it seems to me Russia is learning from China in conducting what we call gray zone tactics right now. So the gray zone is something that is very vague. It's not necessarily kinetic. For example, deploying the unmanned system into your air territory. But according to international law, it could be, not very clear whether you should shoot it down. But that tactics aims at not only wearing us down, but also testing our vulnerability, and when possible, driving wedges among ourselves. So if we see, as like General Brilov said, as a normal, that's exactly what they want to create, a new normal. And then you become numb of it. But if you shoot down right now, it could be intriguing of unnecessary or unwanted escalation of tension. So what should we do about it?
Thank you. So who wants to respond to it? Okay, first. I love the Taiwan dialogue here.
No, I am not answering the Taiwan question, but I will try to provide some facts. Actually, for Taiwan M&D, we do an analysis for the gray zone operations to different 6 types of the operation. One is lawfare, and we all see what happens that they use not just Russia and China. And the other one is deception. Deception is very important concept because, we can be divided. And I like this times on the bottom of this, actually yesterday said, divided we fall. And keep that in mind. We will not be divided. That's the second one. And the third one will be deplete. Use General Brilov that your earlier mentioned. 100 of the drones. They are not just trying to escalate to a big war, but deplete all the resources, your energy. And if you let your guard down, they will continue to use other things to coerce your military readiness. Then the next one will be contain. And contain one, and they will force you to make unnecessary actions. They will use that as an excuse to launch some unintentional large-scale conflict. I think we would like to suggest you to consider this is a dangers of the gray zone. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Do you want to respond?
Just real quick. Clausewitz, Sun Tzu, Jomini, all of the great thinkers about war said this in their own language, essentially, and that is the enemy gets a vote. Our enemies are at war with us. Our enemies are at war with us. Many of our nations talk about we're in competition with them. Here's a fact. If our enemy is at war and we are competing, we are losing. Get that? If our enemy's at war and we're competing, we are losing. And so I would just offer that one of the first things we have to do is understand that we are in war, and then start making decisions along those lines. In the beginning of the early months of 2014, we put forward proposals for CAP, Combat Air Patrol, and other measures that would, we thought, be non-escalatory. The decision was made that if we did that, it would escalate the war. So we took no action. And Russia, they escalated and escalated and escalated. So what we know is what we did not work. What we'll never know is if we had taken those actions, would it have worked? So I'll just close by saying, if your enemy is at war and you are competing, you're losing.
Thank you. So let's collect 3 questions at a time. So 1, 2, and 3 there. So could we start first? Try to keep it short. I know it's tempting to use a comment and pose it as a question. I know I do it all the time, but please try. Thank you.
Well, I'm going to say something shocking, which is we really screwed up on Ukraine because we spent too much time talking about what we won't do. Putin never had to worry about whether he was going to provoke any kind of a confrontation because we practically wrote the battle plan for him. So what are the lessons learned from that for Taiwan? What do we want to make sure we don't repeat?
Thank you. Very good question. Second there in the middle, if I may ask, and third gentleman over there. So in the middle, please. Thank you.
So China is definitely not only an economic threat. We see Chinese drones in Europe, FK3 system in Serbia. Serbia and China just had a military exercise. How is Europe going to respond to China's security posture in Europe?
And could you just briefly introduce yourself? I forgot to ask. Yeah.
Ivana Stradner from FDD.
Thank you. And the third question right there, please. Yeah, there we go.
Thank you. Hugo von Essen from the Stockholm Center for Eastern European Studies, the Swedish think tank. So one of the things we focus on is the cooperation between Russia and China, and we have this long-standing project now. We just launched a digital dashboard a couple of months ago, if I can do some shameless advertisement for this, where we follow Russia-China ties. We've talked a lot about how China is enabling Russia, amplifying the Russian threat against European security. That's relevant for us here in Poland. But one of the things more long-term which we're trying to look at increasingly is the opposite. How could and is Russia amplifying the Chinese threat against Asian security? What role is Russia playing today to help strengthen China? And in the future, in various different conflict scenarios, what role could Russia play for China there? Thank you.
Thank you. 3 quite quick questions. So pick any of those you want, if there are any. Mark, you
I'm going to take that last one first and just say, I agree with you. We're studying this as well. We've found about 800 instances of exchange, military, economic, or intelligence exchange between them and support. But what's really happened is over the first 2 years, I think, was a lot of economic support. But as Russia became the weaker and weaker party in this partnership, they've had to give up more. And the things that worry me the most is the alleged, the Indo-PACOM commander mentioned it once and hasn't mentioned it since, transfer of submarine quieting technology. That is the Rosetta Stone for the U.S. military in the Pacific. We need F-35s and submarines to work. And if our submarines are losing their advantage over Chinese submarines, that's a serious issue. So that's number one. And Russia's held off on giving that for decades. Number 2 is the recent RUSI report on the transfer of both technology and equipment for the conduct of the airborne part of a cross-strait invasion. That's hard to do. The cross-strait invasions really damn hard, and it's more likely to end up in Gallipoli than it is in Incheon currently. But the more Russia transfers technology, and Russia is a very good airborne military. They had a bad day in Ukraine in February of 2022, but they're a very good airborne military. And so those two things alone should worry us. And Putin is becoming more and more the junior little brother partner in this relationship. And if you're in that position and you have something of value, your big brother is going to take it from you. And so I'm very worried about where this is heading. It absolutely is affecting the balance of power. That first one is between the U.S. and China. The second one is really between Taiwan and China. And in both cases, it gives China a significant step-ups.
Thank you. General?
I'd like to hit just really quick Serbia and then answer your larger question. Few Europeans and almost zero Americans understand who's doing the most work in Serbia. Who would that be? The United States of America. The Serbian military does about 2 big exercises with Russia a year. Serbia has a state partnership with the U.S. Army and Air Force National Guard. They do between 22 and 26 exercises a year in Serbia. So why do I bring this up? The way we fix China and Russia, in my opinion, is that we have to engage in these countries, like Serbia. We need to be doing things with them to try to help share some of their, to share values and things. And why do I bring this up? Right now, my country is withdrawing rather than moving forward and engaging. And I think moving forward and engaging is the answer.
Hey, can I add one thing on Serbia? I will say I agree with you that it's important for the United States to stay forward and engage. But I think we need to demand from Serbia that Vucic and his side thug Dudik play a less disruptive role in the Balkans. They have not been contributors for peace. So while I do believe that training the Serbian military has value and making sure that they have the values of the U.S. military, I think we have to pull a very hard line with the Serbian political leadership that their behavior is unacceptable. I think both Russia and China initiate some of this bad behavior, but it's also intrinsic to the Balkans. And Serbia needs to be a more productive partner in bringing both Serbia and Kosovo into the European Union.
Thank you. General, do you want to respond? Okay.
To answer the first question the gentleman asked, I think that Taiwan, what we can share to the Europe, perhaps I would suggest what we can learn from Europe, or we can share some of the lessons. I think this is very valuable for both sides. For example, like we have allocate certain budget for our mobile defense system, for example, like coastal missile, and invest to procure a large quantity of them drones. And second, it will be we do continually hardening our infrastructure, for example, like cyber and others communications, because we understand if the day happens, we may lose all our communication. And the third one is probably we have the best, because the gray zone operation, we've been dealing with China gray zone operation over years. There's a tremendous how we counter disinformation that we can share to Europe, and also how we can do, not just benefit for us, but also benefit for the European nation, because you will be targeted by not just for China, but also by Russia, because they want you to keep silent while they are trying to, do something bad together. So that's something that I think we can like to share with you or learn from you. Particularly, if there's a chance that we can look for a co-production or joint venture. I think that is something we can learn from each other. Thank you.
Thank you.
I might just mention, it's worth looking at it from a business perspective too, a commercial perspective. So, I mean, a lot of these systems are operating in both theaters, right? I mean, the K9, which is our self-propelled howitzer, is also the most proliferated howitzer in Europe, for instance. So I think from a capability standpoint, we're certainly learning lessons across both theaters. We've heard a lot of discussion last day or two about need for more industrial capacity. Navy panel this morning about federated shipbuilding and shipyards working together. If we just do more of the same, and this is not Europe specific, if we just do more of the same industrially with the threat picture the way it is and changing so quickly, we're going to fail. We need to figure out how we build at scale, we learn quickly and iterate, and involve new technologies fast. So I respectfully suggest for the group that there are great lessons working with Korean, Japanese, other companies to take from that. While at the same time, as from European defense and sovereign capability, there should be an insistence that it be done here.
Thank you. We have time for roughly 2 questions. I see one and second over there.
Thanks. Yes, Richard Walker from Deutsche Welle. Chinese nuclear weapons, I just wanted to ask about that. A tiny little topic near the end. They're expanding very rapidly. Thoughts on the best American response towards that? And in terms of kind of learnings from the Ukraine war, arguably Russia's nuclear threats have been extremely effective. What do you guys think the Chinese are learning from that? And what would be learnings for us about how to blunt those threats' effectiveness if they did come to use in a Taiwan scenario? Thanks.
Thank you. Second question, please.
Hi, Virginia Allen. I'm a reporter with the Daily Signal. We're based out of Washington, D.C. So obviously lots of conversation about Taiwan, China. At the end of the day, the greatest concern and threat is that we'll get to a point where China is willing to invade Taiwan. What would need to happen or not happen for us to get to that point where China would say, yes, the benefit is greater than the risk to launch an invasion?
And maybe can we pick up the very last question there, and then each of you will get 1 minute to tell you all the answers.
Chris Zaleski from Boeing Institute. We are a think tank specialized in Polish relations with Asia. And I have a very specific question about industry. We observe every month that China is putting more and more American-based companies on the blacklist, and that they are to choose between supporting Taiwan and cooperation with Taiwan in this kind of dual-use technologies. And my question is how effective this strategy is from the Taiwanese perspective and from the American perspective. So does the blacklisting strategy work on the commercial side of the military?
Thank you. So each of you get 1 minute. Answer anything you want, or give me 1 or 2 action points, what you think Europeans should be doing. Mark, please.
So I'll start with, I'll take the question on the U.S. being ready for Taiwan. Look, what we need to continue to replenish our munitions. The greatest thing, the most positive thing that's happened for U.S. military readiness in the Pacific was the invasion of Ukraine. I know Bridge Colby doesn't understand this, but our munitions are down around 25%, including our munitions for the Pacific. That has changed dramatically over the last 3 years, and we're getting those munition levels up. We need to be ready for this. The other things we need to do is train with Taiwan, as Congress has ordered. We haven't done that. We're supposed to fight alongside them, but for 50 years we've ignored them. We have to break that chain, and then we need the Europeans to join us in selling weapons so that Taiwan has sufficient weapons of their own to hold off Taiwan to the U.S. and potentially Japanese or Australian forces can get there. So there's a lot of things that can be done, and we can move 2027 to 2030 or 2031. So from my perspective, that's the most important thing. I'll take my last 20 seconds to say that the blacklist, the listing of Chinese companies is good and effective. It'd be better if the United States created one list and ran it out of one agency and didn't need Congress to order them to put people on lists. It's obvious to me that state-owned enterprises are both making it hard for U.S. companies to compete, hard for European companies to compete with unfair and unlevel playing fields. But in addition, there is a military civilian nexus and they've announced it in civil-military fusion, that allows them to take the technology that they develop in the United States and in Europe and make their weapon systems better. So from my perspective, they're an adversary. We should not give them technology that they can use to develop weapons to defeat us, and we shouldn't give them monopolies over equipment like LiDAR, drones, 5G, that we need to fight ourselves.
Thank you, Mark. General, please.
Well, since I only have 1 minute, I have to deliver some of the message I think is important for us. One is we're all faced, Ukraine been fighting their war for over 3 years. So we wish their victories. That's number one. Number two is we honor their sacrifice, and we also try to do our best, whatever we can. And third one is there's so many things that we can learn from the Ukrainian theater that could, elevate our overall readiness. And the last one will be, we have to do this because the defeat of the Ukraine, that will signal China take more aggression to Taiwan. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. General Breedlove.
In a derivative way, I'd like to address this question over here by talking just a minute about deterrence. I think there's 4 levels of deterrence. We have still a good strategic nuclear deterrent out there. The world understands that. I think that we still have tactical nuclear deterrence, but that deterrence is fading, and we need to reestablish that deterrence in this world. Mr. Putin lowers that bar every time he talks, he talks about nukes. Conventional deterrence, it seems that we still have good conventional deterrence inside NATO nations. We have 0 conventional deterrence outside NATO nations. Our leaders said over and over and over, we will defend every inch of NATO. What Mr. Putin heard every time they said was, everybody else is fair game. And so we've got to reestablish conventional deterrence outside of NATO. And then I would tell you, someone brought up earlier the gray zone, or as NATO likes to call it, the hybrid war. I call it the war below the lines. We have 0 deterrence in the gray zone, war below the lines. We've got to figure out how to do that.
Thank you, sir. Michael?
Yeah, just a couple comments. So one specific to nuclear weapons. In Korea, we work with the Korean government, the Korean Navy, because we have nuclear neighbor. And the way we decided to go about it, my predecessors decided to go about it, was submarine-launched ballistic missiles, VLS. So actually the KSS-3 that we're talking about here in Poland, not so dissimilar a problem, right? As we're talking to the Polish Navy about it, we've got a neighbor, we want to hold them at bay, we understand they have nuclear weapons, and how do we address that? So from a technology standpoint, that's at least how we think about it. I would just like to make one last comment, because this is rightfully focused on the big political challenges. But I've spent my 35-year career, 40-year career at this point in security cooperation, and passionate about it from a government side, military side, and now industry side. At a time like now, when political sort of structures and alliances are really shaken, my observation is that if you create economic bonds between countries, wherever they be, that is significant. I think back to, Phil, you remember the Dubai Ports World, right? There was a significant fissure between the U.S. at the time and the UAE because there were no economic ties. And the UAE very strategically went about building economic ties, and over decades. And now I think it has the largest business council in D.C., right? And these ties, and it's a much tougher relationship. So I give you that by way of background and saying, at a time like now, when political fissures are deep, we should be looking for expanding partnerships and for deepening economic cooperation. And that will mean no matter what conflict comes next, or no matter what political changes come next, you're toughened to endure those challenges. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. That was our panel. And should we hope and support Ukraine in winning and Taiwan in rightly defending itself? Thank you.